Barron Trump has always been the quiet one in a family of loud personalities. While his father, Donald Trump, dominated headlines and sparked heated debates, Barron rarely stepped into the spotlight. His decision to enroll at New York University was no accident. Barron sought an environment that would challenge his perspectives and sharpen his mind, away from the constant scrutiny tied to his last name. The lecture hall at NYU's Stern School of Business buzzed with energy as students filled the rows, adjusting their notebooks and laptops. It was just another typical day in Professor Morgan's business ethics class, except it wasn't. Known for her fierce intellect and unapologetic critiques, she was a professor who pushed her students to think harder, dig deeper, and confront the uncomfortable truths lurking in the world of business. She didn't just teach, she provoked. "Let's talk about ethics in modern business," she began, her voice commanding the attention of the packed room. She paused, allowing the words to settle before delivering her punchline. And who better to examine than Donald Trump? The words landed like a bombshell. Some students visibly tensed, their discomfort palpable. The air shifted immediately. Nervous chuckles rippled through the hall as students exchanged glances. Some grinned knowingly, others fidgeted uncomfortably. In the second row, Barron Trump sat quietly, his face calm, giving no hint of what he might be thinking. Professor Morgan didn't hold back. She launched into a no-holds-barred breakdown of Donald Trump's business empire, his triumphs, his failures, his larger-than-life persona, and the controversies that seemed to follow him like a shadow. "Trump's business ventures are the perfect case study," she said, her voice laced with both disdain and intrigue. A mix of calculated risk and at times questionable ethics. Let's dissect them. Were they brilliant strategies or disasters wrapped in a shiny package? Her words came fast and furious. Aggressive branding, manipulative tactics, moral flexibility. Each phrase landed with precision, forcing the students to confront the darker sides of Trump's empire. To many, this was just business as usual, the rich playing the game by their own rules, pushing boundaries until they broke. But Barron, sitting just 2 rows from the front, was listening carefully. He didn't flinch, didn't shift uncomfortably. He was absorbing it all, not as an outsider, but as the son of the man at the centre of it all. The lecture continued, with Barron's father being pulled into a whirlwind of critiques. But as the class delved deeper into the conversation, something unexpected happened. Barron, who had remained quiet up until this point, raised his hand. The room froze. A few students glanced at him, then quickly looked away, unsure of what to expect. Some had whispered about Barron's presence in the class, wondering if he would even speak. But now all eyes were on him. Professor Morgan paused mid-sentence, clearly surprised but intrigued. "Yes, Mr. Trump?" she asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and challenge. Barron stood up. His movements were deliberate, measured. His voice, when it came, was steady, neither defiant nor apologetic. "Thank you for the lecture, Professor Morgan," he began, his tone polite but firm. "It's important to analyse figures like my father to understand the complexities of business ethics, but I'd like to offer a different perspective." The entire room held its breath. Barron had spoken, and now there was no turning back. "My father's story isn't just about success or failure," Barron continued. "It's about risk. It's about resilience. It's about being willing to step into arenas where failure is not just a possibility, but a certainty. And that in itself is a lesson." He paused, looking around the room. The courage to take risks and face criticism head on, that's something worth learning from. The students, many of whom had been quietly dissecting his every word, were now hanging on his every syllable. Some, who had giggled at the mention of his father's name, now shifted uncomfortably, realizing that Barron wasn't here to play the role of a defensive son. He wasn't here to justify his father's actions. He was here to challenge them, to shift the conversation in a new direction. Ethics in business isn't black and white, Barron continued. It's about the process, the choices made along the way. We often sit in judgment, looking at the outcomes of decisions, but the real question is, would we make better choices if we were in those situations? Or would we too be tempted to take the same risks? There was a moment of silence, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Barron wasn't just defending his father's controversial choices. He was challenging the entire class to think differently about what they considered ethical, to view business not through a lens of judgment, but through a lens of complexity. Business decisions, especially those made at the highest levels, are rarely made in a vacuum. They are influenced by pressure, by time constraints, by unforeseen obstacles. Barron wasn't asking for sympathy for his father. He was asking for a deeper understanding of the game itself. Professor Morgan, ever the provocateur, leaned forward. Her interest piqued. "But Mr. Trump," she said, her voice sharpening, "do you believe your father's business decisions have consistently upheld ethical standards?" Barron didn't hesitate. "No," he admitted, his answer clear and unwavering. "I'm not here to defend every decision he's made, but ethics in business isn't just about the outcome, it's about the choices we make, even when we know the odds are stacked against us." The room, which had once buzzed with skepticism and judgment, was now silent. Students who had once grinned knowingly at Barron's presence now seemed to be rethinking their own assumptions. The conversation had shifted, and it was clear that Barron had taken them to a place they hadn't expected. "Criticism is important," Barron added, his voice calm but resolute. "It holds us accountable. But when that criticism turns into ridicule, we lose the chance to learn. My father's career isn't a story of one mistake after another. It's a story of highs and lows, of moments of brilliance and moments of failure. And if we only focus on the failures, we miss the lessons in between." Some students, who had been skeptical moments ago, now began to nod. Others started clapping, their applause tentative at first, then building in volume. Barron returned to his seat, his expression composed, as though he had simply spoken the truth that needed to be heard. Professor Morgan, ever the intellectual, offered a thoughtful nod. "You've given us a lot to consider, Mr. Trump," she said, her tone warmer than it had been at the start. "Thank you for offering a perspective that challenges our assumptions. That's what this class is about, debating, questioning, and exploring." As the class ended and the students filed out of the lecture hall, many approached Barron. A few lingered, offering thoughtful comments, while others expressed admiration for the courage it took to speak up. One young woman, her eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and respect, caught up with Barron as he walked toward the courtyard. "Barron," she said hesitantly, "I didn't agree with everything you said, but you made me think differently. I appreciate that." Barron smiled, his demeanour unchanged. "That's all I was hoping for," he said quietly. In that moment, Barron had done more than just defend his father. He had shifted the conversation. He had pushed his classmates to question their biases, to reconsider the judgments they had made about his family, and to approach the subject of business ethics with more empathy and understanding. And in doing so, he had shown that the loudest voices in the room aren't always the ones that make the most impact. Sometimes it's the quiet ones, the ones who take the time to listen, to think, and to challenge the status quo, that leave the lasting impression. For Barron Trump, it was never about being in the spotlight. It was about making sure that when he spoke, his words mattered. And in that NYU lecture hall, his words had done just that. They had challenged not just his classmates, but anyone who heard them, to think more deeply about the complexities of business, ethics, and the people who shape our world. We also saw the significance of empathy and fairness. Barron's approach to his father's controversial decisions wasn't about blindly defending them, but about offering a more nuanced view. He reminded everyone that ethics are not always black and white, but a spectrum of choices influenced by countless factors. This perspective allowed for a more thoughtful and balanced conversation, one that focused on learning rather than condemning. Finally, we learned the value of courage. The courage to speak up, especially when your viewpoint might challenge the norm. Barron didn't shy away from a difficult conversation or a potentially uncomfortable position. His willingness to step forward, share his perspective, and engage with his peers showed that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is challenge assumptions and engage in respectful, open dialogue. Through this story, we were reminded that growth comes from questioning, learning, and expanding our understanding. It's about taking a step back, listening carefully, and being open to the possibility that our initial judgments might not tell the whole story. And perhaps most importantly, we learned that the quietest voices can sometimes have the most profound impact, especially when they inspire reflection and deeper thought in others. If you enjoyed the story and found it meaningful, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps us reach more people. We'd also love to hear from you. Share your thoughts and the lessons you've learned in the comments below. Your insights could inspire someone else.